Israel no longer belongs within the civilized community of nations, and its barbarism demands nothing less than decisive action to safeguard not just the Middle East, but the entire global order.
A bold, fiery speech that's shaken up Southeast Asia and beyond. Malaysia's Prime Minister has just called for something unprecedented: a united Muslim front to hold Israel accountable. This powerful message has resonated deeply within the Muslim world, stirring up debates and igniting calls for change. But what does this mean on the global stage? To understand the weight of this message, let's set the stage.
Shout out to the president of Malaysia. His name again is Anwar Ibrahim. Anwar Ibrahim is working overtime for the Palestinian resistance. You love to see it. I just hope one day, these Arab countries can grow some balls and actually lift a finger for those who are suffering right across their border. It truly would be incredible.
I concur with the many excellent points and recommendations made by fellow leaders. Their views reflect a united voice of the Muslim Ummah, born out of the surge of shared conviction among our people. We acknowledge that the circumstances confronting the Muslim world and the Ummah has been most trying and challenging. Yet, it is indeed highly commendable that painstaking efforts have been made and continue to be made, including summits such as this, so as to find ways and means to put an end to violence, destruction, and misery brought on the Palestinian people and to relieve their long and untold suffering. Israel no longer belongs within the civilized community of nations, and its barbarism demands nothing less than decisive action to safeguard not just the Middle East, but the entire global order. 50 years ago, the world was so horrified by the atrocities in South Africa that the United Nations General Assembly took the unprecedented step of denying its government a seat of the Assembly. Israel, however, has gone beyond the pale, beyond reason, beyond humanity itself in its vile and blatant perpetration of genocide of the people of Palestine. These cumulative acts of violence against an entire nation leaves us with no choice but to demand the swift and effective action of the international community, including embargo, suspension, and even expulsion. In its relentless campaigns, Israel has now struck at the very heart of the international community's lifeline for Palestine by targeting the United Nations Relief and Works Agency for Palestine refugees. By barring UNRWA from operating, Israel is causing the collapse of the world's humanitarian response, cutting off the most basic means of survival in Gaza for those who have already lost so much. We must put an end to this continued senseless carnage and take immediate steps to furnish more effective protection for the UNRWA. We must accord better protection for the UN peacekeepers in Lebanon, comprising nearly 50 nations, including Malaysia, who have been attacked and terrorized by Israeli forces. The international community must act swiftly and forcefully. As an immediate measure, we must push, as Malaysia did at the UN General Assembly in September, to impose an immediate arms embargo against Israel. Nevertheless, the severity of Israel's assault on humanity's most basic rules of international compact deserves consideration of a more serious response. For the sake of not only the Palestinian but humanity itself, we must punish and deter Israel's repeated violations of international law and norms. We should therefore build a consensus towards suspending or even expelling Israel from the United Nations itself. Israel's trail of atrocities has already spread into Lebanon, Yemen, Syria, Iraq, and Iran. If the world turns away now, this violence will not remain contained. It will ignite a fire that threatens to engulf the entire region and the rest of the world. At the end of the day, the most aspects of our concern are the victims. It is therefore imperative that we redouble current efforts to help rebuild Gaza from the ruins of destruction. Of crucial importance is implementing the plans without any undue delay. We must draw a line in the sand, not only as Muslims, but as fellow humans, united and bound by our fragile mortality and committed to a simple truth, a wish for a safer, kinder world for our children and the generations to come. Thank you.
Malaysia is a diverse, multi-ethnic nation with a Muslim majority, and for years, it's maintained a strong pro-Palestinian stance. But it hasn't typically been this outspoken on the international stage. So why now? The Prime Minister, Anwar Ibrahim, recently stepped into office with a reputation for progressive ideas and a history of advocating for the Palestinian cause. His latest remarks were delivered at an Islamic summit, where he urged Muslim nations to unite and push for consequences against Israel. Anwar called for what he described as effective action, not just condemnations, but real consequences. According to him, if the Muslim world stands together, it can wield enough power to demand accountability. But what kind of actions is he calling for? And why are his words striking a chord right now? The timing of Anwar's speech is no coincidence. The recent intensification of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict has heightened global tensions and put Malaysia in the spotlight. Many leaders and citizens in Muslim-majority nations are frustrated, feeling like the international community hasn't done enough to address the issues Palestinians face. Throughout Malaysia, protests have surged, demanding action and showing solidarity with the Palestinian people. By addressing this on such a big platform, Anwar is signaling that Malaysia is ready to push harder, not just with words, but possibly with actions. Anwar didn't stop with Malaysia. He called for unity across the entire Muslim world. Now, this is huge. The idea of a united Muslim front isn't new, but it's one that's rarely seen in practice. With around 50 Muslim-majority countries, many with significant political and economic power, unity could change the geopolitical landscape. Anwar argued that if these nations worked together, they could impose significant economic pressure or diplomatic actions that could influence Israel's policies. But here's the challenge. Muslim-majority countries have diverse interests and, in some cases, conflicting alliances. Will Anwar's call resonate across nations like Turkey, Iran, Indonesia, and Saudi Arabia? Let's break down what Anwar's vision could look like in action. He's urging for penalties, but what kind? Economic sanctions are one option, and while many Muslim-majority countries don't have direct trade ties with Israel, they could still restrict certain goods or impose broader boycotts that impact other nations involved with Israel. There's also the potential for diplomatic moves, cutting ties with countries that support Israel, or using platforms like the United Nations to push for resolutions, are all on the table. These could potentially disrupt regional alliances, creating ripple effects far beyond Southeast Asia. But make no mistake, this could have a backlash. Anwar's strong stance could bring tension with Western allies and countries with ties to Israel. So, is Malaysia ready for the consequences of this bold step? Neighboring countries in Southeast Asia, like Indonesia and Brunei, also have pro-Palestinian stances, but they're watching closely. Will they join Malaysia in taking a harder stance, or will they stick to diplomatic paths? Indonesia, with the world's largest Muslim population, has expressed similar sentiments, but they've historically avoided taking steps that could strain relations with Western powers. Analysts believe Anwar's statement could encourage stronger unity in Southeast Asia on Palestinian issues, even if these countries don't take immediate action. But there's also a risk of creating rifts with nations like Singapore, which has a more neutral stance and strong Western ties. So what does Anwar's call for unity mean on a global scale? Well, if it gains traction, it could reshape alliances in the Muslim world and increase tensions with the West, particularly the U.S., a major ally of Israel. And this unity could affect how international organizations, like the United Nations, address the Israeli-Palestinian conflict in the future. The emergence of a strong Muslim coalition could also encourage global movements, amplifying the voices that call for Palestinian rights and potentially forcing other countries to reconsider their positions. So, where does Malaysia go from here? Will Anwar take these words further with concrete actions, or was this more of a symbolic message? Malaysia could be on the verge of stepping into a more prominent role in international politics, especially within the Muslim world. But how this plays out depends on whether other nations are ready to join Malaysia on this path. Anwar Ibrahim's call for unity and action has put Malaysia in the headlines and sparked conversations worldwide. But do you think it's possible for the Muslim world to truly unite on this issue? Will we see actual penalties, or is this just a bold statement that fades away? Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to hit that like button if you enjoyed today's breakdown. Subscribe for more deep dives into global politics. Until next time.